On March 15, 1942, 18,000 feet above the steamy rice paddies of Malaya, a 24-year-old British pilot named Geoffrey Boy Browning was locked in a deadly ballet. He was at the controls of a Supermarine Spitfire MKV, sleek and deadly, the pride of the RAF's Far East Command. But today it felt like a coffin on wings. His foe was a Mitsubishi A6M0, a featherweight marvel of Japanese engineering, light as silk, nimble as a swallow, able to outturn the Spitfire in a heartbeat and climb like it was defying gravity. 4 months, the Zero had haunted the skies from Singapore to Rangoon, a spectral avenger that turned Allied air superiority into a cruel joke. Browning was no rookie, he'd aced through the Battle of Britain. But here, in the suffocating heat of the Pacific Theater, he was prey. The Zero was glued to his 6 o'clock, its 20mm cannons flickering like fireflies. He yanked his stick into a desperate scissors maneuver, the Spitfire's Merlin engine roaring in protest. The Zero anticipated it, slipping inside his turn with contemptuous ease. Browning's world shattered, shells punched through his wing root, igniting the fuel lines. Flames licked the cockpit as he punched out, tumbling into the humid void below. His parachute bloomed over enemy territory, where Malay insurgents loyal to the Japanese waited with machetes. This was the brutal arithmetic of the air war in Southeast Asia. This was the fall of Singapore. But mere weeks later, another rice farmer from Kyushu would claw into those same skies and rewrite the rules. It wasn't glory. It wasn't empire. It was survival, a charnel house where British pilots were funneled into the maw of the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service. The Allied press dubbed the defenders the Monsoon Squadron, but the pilots whispered of their forward base at Cowling Airfield as the abattoir. The culprit wasn't just the Zero's agility. It was the tactics. The Boffins in Whitehall, the test pilots at Farnborough, preached a gospel. Never dogfight a Zero at low speed. Boom and zoom, they said, dive from altitude, slash with your 8.303s, and extend away on that Rolls-Royce power. It was the same playbook that had worked against Messerschmitts over Dover. But in the frantic furballs over Malaya's jungles, that gospel was dooming good men to fiery graves. The Tommies were aces in their own right, veterans of the Blitz, of desert sands in North Africa. They knew their birds inside out, luring Zeros into prolonged turns where the lighter foe could be bled dry. They knew exactly where to rake the engine nacelles. The Japanese were hemorrhaging pilots, their early gains in the invasion turning to desperate attrition. What the Monsoon Squadron couldn't foresee, what those cocky RAF aces never imagined, was that salvation wasn't barreling in from Tokyo's arsenals. It wasn't a wonder weapon or a revised manual from the Emperor's strategists. It was a 28-year-old taro farmer. A man so plain he'd been deemed too ancient for the cockpit. A man who'd learned to shoot not from gunnery drills but by potting darting kingfishers over the misty paddies of Kagoshima. This is the tale of Hiroshi Tanaka and the humble, half-forgotten farmer's ploy that crowned him the Ijan's deadliest samurai of the skies. To grasp how one dirt-scrabbling peasant could unravel the RAF's aerial phalanx, you must first till the soil of his origins. Hiroshi Tanaka wasn't bred for bushido. Born in 1914 amid the typhoon-lashed fields of southern Kyushu, his youth wasn't wasted on sumo dojos or imperial academies. It was forged in mud, monsoon, and meager harvests. This was a David and Goliath saga, echoing the white death of Simo Haiha across frozen Finnish bogs. But Tanaka's Goliath loomed larger than any foe, it was existence itself. The Great Depression clawed into rural Japan like a typhoon, scorching the paddies and starving the villages. Tanaka's family teetered on ruin. His unyielding gamin, that stoic endurance, was hammered from hunger. He and his grandfather stalked the waterways for supper, and herein lies the genesis of his lethal tweak. At-13, young Hiroshi didn't hunt with optics or iron sights. He wielded a battered fowling piece, an heirloom from the Meiji era, and one ironclad edict from Ojizen: waste no shot, boy. The kingfisher flees not straight but in zigs and ghosts. Those iridescent birds didn't flee linearly, they jinked, feinted, looped back on themselves. To drop one mid-dart you couldn't bead the beak. You had to divine its phantom path, deflection shooting, pure and primal. While city lads conjugated verbs, Tanaka was intuiting angles, gusts and velocities in the blink of an eye. He wasn't merely accurate. He was an apex shadow, internalizing the calculus of intercepting motion. This was his Tamahagane edge, his invisible katana. It was a paddy-rat's precision no drill sergeant could instill. But Tanaka craved more than foul. He yearned for the heavens. In 1932, his grandfather ferried him to a naval air exhibition in Nagasaki. He beheld Ijin squadrons wheeling in crisp Vs, their biplanes carving the clouds like Shinto kites. At 18 he was ensnared. "That's my daimyo," he vowed to Ojizan. The road was a quagmire. Penniless, illiterate in the classics, when his grandfather perished in a mill accident, crushed by a rogue camshaft, Hiroshi at 20 shouldered the farm alone. He was shackled, yet gammon prevailed. By dawn he'd plant rice, by dusk he'd pore over borrowed texts by lantern light. It spanned 7 years to scrape into agricultural college. He bartered labor for flight hours, soloing a battered moth biplane on windswept strips. When the bombs fell on Pearl Harbor, Hiroshi Tanaka was 27. He bolted for the nearest recruitment hall, begging a zero slot. Denied. Overage. In 1941, the cutoff for carrier jocks was 25. "Ground crew for you, old man," they sneered. "Instruct the pups." It crushed him like a downed spar. It was the Admiralty dismissing a radar glitch as spec compliant. It was the Red Army scoffing at high-res scope aversion. Doctrine deemed him dross for dauntless duty. So Tanaka emulated the fox. He slithered through the cracks. He inked into the IJN reserve as a trainer. For 8 interminable months, he molded whelps half his years, watching them ship out to glory while he paced the tarmac. Tanaka seethed. He badgered colonels, penned missives to admirals, became the most vexing sensei in Sasebo. At last, to muzzle the mule, they relented. Advanced quals followed. He slotted into a fresh kokutai, the third kokutai. And in February 1942, as Jeffrey Browning plummeted into Malice, 28-year-old Jisan Tanaka, the creaky taro tender from Kyushu, boarded a rust bucket freighter bound for Singapore. Cowling Airfield. The abattoir. The strip he debarked upon was no Imperial bastion. It was purgatory. The air reeked, a cloying slurry of avgas, decaying fronds and cordite ghosts. The runway was a cratered scar of coral and clay, hewn from mangrove thickets. The ops hut was a termite-riddled lean-to dubbed the Monsoon Pagoda. Bunks were stilted bamboo hovels, ankle-deep in slime, ringed by the husks. Scores of Spitfires and Hurricanes, noses crumpled, fuselages flayed, canopies crazed with bullet stars. This was the ossuary of the Monsoon Squadron. Tanaka bunked down, essaying his mates. They weren't the eager ensigns he'd forged. They were wraiths, sallow from quinine tabs, sockets bruised from blackout vigils, flight gear crusted with salt and shame. Seasoned yet stalked. Tanaka, the geezer, the clod kicker, shuffled in. They sized him, fresh fodder. Another plug for yesterday's pallbearer. He eyed his steed, a Nakajima A6M20. It was the selfsame ghost that had felled Browning, lithe, lethal, yet fragile as rice paper against the Spitfire's armored punch. The Kokutai's XO, a scar-faced vet named Sato, dispensed the rote litany, the one slaughtering them wholesale. No low-speed turns with the Tommy spit. Altitude is your ally, stoop, sting, scamper. Hiroshi nodded, absorbing the syllables. Yet he divined what the scrolls elided. He divined kingfishers. Dawn of his inaugural hop thrust him into the crucible. No milk run. Straight to 12,000 feet, gaze raking the pearl-gray vault. His flight had cautioned, they pounce from the anvil clouds. Sight them only in the tracers. Tanaka felt nude. Then the set crackled, Tommy's too high, bearing 270. He craned. There, a Vic of Spitfire stooping, Merlin howls Dopplering. Swifter than sin. He recalled the writ, no turns. Plunge and flee. Hiroshi rammed the throttle, his Zero arrowing earthward in a wail. The agile mount surged, the spits clung. One loosed, incendiaries lanced past his cowl, near enough to singe his sideburns. He bored to treetop graze, sloughing the pack. He taxied home, knuckles blanched, not terror but ire. The cannon was folly. Flight bought breath, not triumph. And Hiroshi Tanaka hadn't voyaged here to respire. He'd come to reap. March 20th, scant days post-landing, Tanaka helmed another sweep. This sortie tangled with a brace of Bristol Blenheim bombers, shepherded by Spitfire Zeros, the Imperial slang for those razor-turning RAF hunters, dubbed so for their zero-radius rolls that mimicked the A6M's own devilry. The melee erupted. Zeros and Spits corkscrewing in thermals thick as soup. Tanaka spied a Spit latching onto his rotmate's tail. The Brit was coiling for the coup. Doctrine urged, extend, seek softer quarry. The farmer's gaze whispered otherwise. Tanaka snap-rolled his Zero, not tracking the foe but plotting the flicker where the Kingfisher would flit. He squeezed. His twin 20 MMS and 7.7S thundered, a sustained 4-heartbeat salvo, not at the Spitfire but into a void 150 meters ahead. It smacked of blunder, squandered ammo. But the RAF pilot, fixated on his prey, blindsided, whipped into a textbook Immelmann, and threaded the gauntlet of shells. The Spit's tailboom sheared clean. It pinwheeled into a pyre of alloy and avgas. First blood for Tanaka. He hadn't outfoxed the turn. Hadn't outclimbed. He'd outfoxed the mind. He'd invoked the yokel calculus the admirals in Tokyo had overlooked. He greased onto cowling a transfigured soul. The shades clustered. He'd notched one. He clapped his plane captain, "This bird's a reed but resilient, and her bite's true." To his wingmen, "Ditch the scrolls. Hunt not the mark but its shade. Lead till your gut screams wide, then lead fuller. It'll gift itself to you." This was the Tamahagane tweak. No rivets or welts. A psyche shift. A paddy hand's poise. The airmen hearkened. They were famished for faith. Their top gun, a prodigy named Ito, nursed shrapnel wounds. They craved a chieftain. And this 28-year-old dirt digger alone spake of pursuit, not evasion. Tanaka commandeered his octet of Zeros, a ragtag Ronin crew, greenhorns, washouts, the walking wounded. No poetic moniker. So the war correspondents, agog at this elder helming havoc, christened them Tanaka's Shadow Circus. And on March 23, the circus unfurled. Tanaka vectored his 8 into a swarm of 28 RAF planes, 28-8, a seppuku stakeout. Yet he schemed. No knife fight frenzy. Farmer's fay. He decreed the paddy weave, pairs intermeshing trails, a fluid lattice born of his boyhood duck hunts. Tanaka plummeted. Spotted a spit. No pivot. He etched lead. Blaze. The Spitfire bloomed. Another lunged at him. His wingmen laced in the weave, inverted and hosed the interloper clear. The circus hummed as one. In 12 minutes of maelstrom, Tanaka's brood felled 7 foes. Hiroshi bagged 3. The circus alighted intact. The abattoir echoed with triumph. The ledger burgeoned, ballooning at a velocity that beggared belief. Hiroshi harvest redux. March 25, Tanaka claims 2 more. March 27, another pair. By March 29, 9 days shy of his debut kill, Hiroshi was a Saikusha, 5 crowns, ace anointed. March 31, 4 spits in 1 furious frame. The elder, the clodhopper, was Malaya's reaper-in-chief. He was a mere aviator. He was sensei. His shadow circus owned the ether. But as with Haiha, eminence exacts toll. The RAF fumed. Losses mounted to farce. Their blitz vets tumbled to ragtag zeros. It defied dogma. And the call sign echoing in there are /T intercepts? Tanaka. Whitehall stirred, much as the Kremlin eyed Simo as the rising sun tracked Sakai's nemesis. The foe evolved. No longer sparring zeros, they stalked Tanaka's circus. The fray turned vendetta. April 5, Tanaka's flight ambushed by an RAF crack squad, aces from 136 Squadron, Spitfire savants. Skies choked with contrails. Tanaka notched 2. Lining a third, his Zero convulsed. Cannon from astern shredded his ailerons. Engine guttered, canopy fogged with glycol steam. He augured in. Parachuted into bramble, clawed free by a Japanese patrol, battered but breathing. 48 hours hence, aloft anew. This pass, pursuing a ferry Fulmer spotter. Hyper-focused, he missed the tail gunner's spite. Rounds chewed his cowling, prop feathered. Second ditching in thrice the span. Not over green hell but the Malacca Strait, shark supper bowl. He pancaked the waves, the Zero slurped under in 20 ticks. Adrift in his May west, seas chilled despite the equator's blaze. Gummin girded him. A farmer knew patience, knew outlasting gales. Then the shadows, dorsal sails. Scores. They prodded, tested. Tanaka, slayer of spits, now quarry to abyssal ancients. He paddled, vigilant. Fins tightened. No blade, no flare, solely yokel resolve. 3 hours he bobbed, ringed. As dusk bled the horizon, a sampan ghosted in. Fisherfolk, tipped by a coastal watcher who'd glimpsed the splash. They rowed hard, flogging the brine to spook the predators. Hauled the sodden, shivering flyboy aboard. Back at Kalang he was flotsam, exposure ravaged, dengue fevered. Medics mandated mat rest. Hiroshi Tanaka, the sky's specter, was benched. His circus sword sans ringmaster. The Tommies crowed, the wraith was worm food. They aired. Tanaka stewed Abed a fortnight, quaking with ague, fixated on one fever dream. The kingfishers were slipping free. He mended. Strode from sickbay, strapped into a fresh Zero, and April 18th reaped anew. One Spitfire. The Phantom revived, vengeant. The RAF hurled hordes. He parried. By May 1, 1942, Hiroshi's sheaf read 23. Too shy of the Ijan pinnacle, set in China by the mythic Saburo Sakai with 25. Sakai's tally was sacrosanct, an emperor's edict untouched for years. Now a 28-year-old fever-fogged farmer in his superior, yet brittle Zero teetered on shattering it. By May 1942, Hiroshi Tanaka was Malaya's mythos incarnate, yet etched in atrophy and ague. The dengue he'd snared recurred, a parasitic scourge. He flew febrile, vision veiling. Ground crews gawked as he taxied in, his Zero filigreed with .303 punctures, him shuddering so from chills they'd hoist the sweat-lacquered husk from the tub. Dual dooms, one aerial against the RAF, one corporeal versus the mosquito's curse. And he prevailed in both. Tally, 23. Sakai's 25 loomed as Fuji, insurmountable, the quintessence of Nipponese supremacy. 2 decades no soul neared. Now this delirious dirt boy in a vaunted vapor was scaling it. May 3, 1942. Tanaka's nadir of illness. Quacks quarantined him. He spurned. Hoisted into the cockpit, skull throbbing like taiko drums. Intel blared, a colossal Allied relief convoy, the Rangoon Relief, barreling in, screened by a tempest of fighters. Tanaka's Circus scrambled to shred it. Firmament fouled with foes. The grandest clash Tanaka knew, Zeros and Spits vortexing in vaporous riot. Hiroshi, sight smudged by sweat, reverted to roots. To the paddies. Spotted a spit fixing on a rotmate. No cogitation, instinct. He barrel-rolled, not to the mark but the mirage where the fisher would flit. Blaze. 20 mms lacerated vacuum. The spit, pledged to its arc, impaled itself. Shredded. 24. He quartered the quoits. Another spit stooping on a distant furball. Tanaka firewalled, his Sakai bellowing. He quartered it off. The Brit, being feinted a Zero-G turn, their hallmark. Tanaka shunned the snare. Executed a Tenka-High-G maneuver, a self-devised helix. Loop over the spit's zenith, drop from its no-man's land, loose a scalpel burst. The Merlin detonated. 25. Parody with Sakai. Legend live. Undeterred. Eyed a Hurricane Zero, a brutish variant fleeing the fray. Tanaka plummeted. The hurry pilot spied, yanking into a frantic spiral climb. Apex ordeal. Yokel's Oracle versus Blitzbred Baron. Tanaka pursued not blindly. He prophesied. Traced the hurry's bolt path. Nosed skyward, unleashing a parabolic deflection volley that mocked mechanics. Shells arced true, rendezvousing at the hurry's bolt hole. Cockpit cord. It cartwheeled into the drink. 26.1 blistering sortie, malaria-mired, Hiroshi Tanaka felled 3. Matched, then mantled the untouchable. He greased his Zero onto Cowlang. The field surged to greet. The abattoir alchemized to Valhalla. The shades of the 3rd Kokutai shouldered their hoary harvest lord aloft. Unequivocally the Ijan's apex reaper. But while Cowlang caroused, the RAF brass in Calcutta keened. This was Sakai's reckoning, the Tommy's lament. 4 moons, British pilots preened in presumption. They piloted the Spitfire aeronautical apex. They were blitz-broken, Burma-bound buccaneers. They knew the Zero's frailty, unarmored, thirsting for fuel. Their creed, bait the low turn, latch the 6, eviscerate. Then Tanaka's Circus materialized. And the creed crumbled. Veteran RAF jocks limped to strips, ashen, palsied. They debriefed yarns that baffled boffins. We'd stoop for the kill, banking it'd flee, it didn't. We'd lure the loop, but it'd ghost. Instead, the ruddy thing would bank bizarre, blaze at blank ether, and poof, our chum's kite erupts beside us. They couldn't parse it. Hunted by yokel riddles beyond ken. Hiroshi had wrought Hihares hex, nullified every edge. Simo cloaked his gleam and gasp. Tanaka veiled his vector, never sighting the strike. The Tommies ward a wisp. A tweak not of alloy but agrarian acuity, smelted in Kyushu's mists. Tanaka solo sundered their swagger. Proved the spit no sovereign. Proved the inferior Zero, gripped by a fisher's foresight, the sky's scythe. The RAF hunters, erstwhile sport slayers, now faltered. Wary. The monsoon squadron flipped. No more quarry but courier, all hinging on one deemed too tardy for the Tanegashima. Yet Triumph's tariff was titanic. This was Hihare's hollow point, the serpent's sting. Tanaka's wasn't one slug. It was inexorable immolation. Days post-pinnacle, Dengue dethroned him. Bedbound he couldn't rise. Fevers flailed him recurrent, ruinous. He'd shed 15 kilos. The man who'd braved spits and Salakians was self-devoured. No ticker tape exit from Malaya. Evac on canvas, a jaundiced skeleton, his frame fractured by the fin he freed. Ferried to clinics in Indochina, then homeland havens. Hero of the hour, invalid in the hush. But Hiroshi bore Gamin the tiller's tenacity. Months in a Yokohama naval ward he knit. There the realm he redeemed requited. June 12, 1942, Hiroshi Tanaka, the taro tender from Kyushu, genuflected in the Imperial Palace. Emperor Hirohito bestowed the Order of the Golden Kite, first class, the zenith of valor. The scroll lauded his indomitable daring, his peerless predatory prowess, but his veridical bequest? The aftershock of agrarian arcana. It was audacity. In 1942 the empire teetered, early blitzes blunted, Allied anvils ascending. The Spitfire was shibboleth, the British unbreakable. Hiroshi Tanaka, with 26 crowns in 44 days, and 7 more in the mop-up, tallying 33 and 17 fevered fortnights, pulverized the parable. Proved a Nipponese peasant and a Nipponese needle could humble the haughtiest. He didn't ink a stanza in air lore. He authored the codex for zero supremacy. His deflection dogma and paddy weave ploys supplanted the IJN playbook, rippling to every carrier from truck to Tokyo Bay. He redeemed Singapore, pivoted the Pacific pendulum, and whither the Reaper post-reckoning? Unlike Hiha's hushed hack, Tanaka's triumph trumpeted. Yet like the moose-maned marksman he clung to clay. No lifer in the ranks. Home to Kyushu, his fame furrowed fields. He collectivized co-ops, mentored youth in the hunt. Politics beckoned. Elected to the Kagoshima Assembly. In 1955 that selfsame sower, once spurned as stale, ascended as prefectural governor. He stewarded his soil as he'd steward the skies. Later he helmed fisheries boards, a folk icon. But marrow deep that paddy prowler. The soul who grokked the stark, savage syntax of the stalk. Thus do daimyo rise. Not via viziers or vaults of vaunted verse, but via the unlettered who espy the air. James McKenna glimpsed cable creep in the P-38, a deathly 3/8-inch sag, and cinched it with 6 inches of piano string. Simo Haiha pierced sniper shibboleths, scorning scope sparkle for trusty irons. Hiroshi Tanaka pierced his superior steed snare. You couldn't out-nimble a spit. But outweight? Aye, and he honed it lifelong in the flicker of feathers. These are the elided epics, the odes to outlaws who outfoxed fate. To clinch the crusade, Hiroshi Tanaka perished in 2001, aged 87. Interred with ancestral rites, idol to the IJN ghosts, paragon of the unquenchable gamin of the Japanese yeoman. If this yarn yanked you as fiercely as its forebears, spare a nod, share these spectral second world sagas. Bell the feed for fresh forged forgotten lore. Each echo endures. We'd relish your dispatch, whence the watch. Our kin sprawls from Hokkaido to Kent. From flyboys' heirs to history hounds, you're woven in the warp. Arigato for the gaze and for guardians of these ghosts.